Devonte Hall was 36 years old, and for 18 months he had been a widower. He wore his wedding ring every day. He called his mother-in-law twice a month and sent her money because she was all he had left of the woman he buried. He was that kind of man. Steady, loyal, the kind who grieves quietly and keeps showing up anyway. He was in Hargrove on a work trip when he walked past a restaurant he hadn't chosen and stopped moving entirely. Because sitting inside, 8 months pregnant, and laughing across a candlelit table at another man was his dead wife. Same jaw, same tilt of the head, same way she tucked her hand under her chin when something amused her. The man across from her was leaning in close, comfortable, his hand resting near hers like he'd earned the right to be there. Adrienne Hall had not died in that Mountain Road accident. She had simply decided Devonte wasn't worth the inconvenience of a divorce and found someone she liked better. What he did next would cost her everything she thought she'd gotten away with. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The coffee was done before the sun came up. Devonte Hall measured 2 scoops, the same 2 scoops he measured every morning, and stood at the kitchen counter while the machine worked. The apartment was quiet, clean, everything in its place. The throw blanket on the couch was folded the same way it had been folded for 18 months. Corners aligned, no wrinkles. A man who couldn't control much had learned to control what he could. He poured his cup and carried it to the drafting table by the window. The city was just waking up outside, streetlights still on. A garbage truck somewhere down the block, mechanical and steady. Devonte set his cup down and pulled the nearest blueprint toward him. A mixed-use retail project on the east side of Clarksville, Phase 2. Foundation specs still pending client approval. He studied the load-bearing column placement for a few minutes, made 2 small notations in pencil, and then stopped. He wasn't looking at the blueprint anymore. He was looking at his hand, at the ring on his left hand. Gold band, simple. The one Adrienne had slid onto his finger 7 years ago in a church full of people they loved. He hadn't moved it, hadn't tried to. Some mornings he barely noticed it. Other mornings, like this one, it sat there on his finger like a question he still didn't know how to stop asking. He picked up his coffee, took a sip, got back to work. By 7:15, he was outside. Mrs. Tatum in 1B had mentioned her porch step was soft. Been meaning to call somebody, baby, but you know how it is. And Devonte had been meaning to get to it all week. He crouched down with a hammer, a handful of nails, and a scrap piece of treated lumber he'd had in his trunk since a job site visit 2 weeks back. The step took 11 minutes to fix. He swept the debris off the porch, knocked on her door, told her it was done, and declined the coffee she offered. "You don't have to do that," she said, pulling her robe tighter. "I know," he said, and he left for work. At the firm, he caught the error before the junior draftsman even knew there was one. Marcus, 26 and ambitious, had submitted a set of structural drawings for Devonte's review. Good work overall. Clean lines, confident. But there was a span calculation on the third-floor ceiling joists that was off. Not dramatically, not the kind of thing that would have jumped out at most people during a quick pass. But Devonte's eye had been trained by a father who built things with his hands and a career that taught him the difference between what looked right and what was right. He walked over to Marcus's desk, set the drawing down flat, and pointed to the number without saying anything about it being wrong. Just, "What's your load assumption?" Marcus pulled up his notes, worked through it, got quiet when he found his own mistake. "I'd have caught it before it went to the client," Marcus said. "Probably," Devonte said. "Now you don't have to." He walked back to his office. No announcement, no performance, just the work. He was on the road by 2 in the afternoon, heading west on I-40 with the windows cracked and the radio low. 3 hours to Hargrove. The site visit wasn't until Friday morning, but he'd booked Thursday night deliberately. He'd learned a long time ago that arriving a day early on a new project let you see a city the way it actually was, not the way you'd been briefed to expect it. He thought about Adrienne sometimes on long drives. It was harder to keep his mind busy when there was nothing to do but steer. He thought about the way she laughed too loud at bad jokes, and then covered her mouth like she could take it back. He thought about the morning she'd told him she wanted to start her lifestyle brand, and he'd said, "Then let's start it," and meant it. He'd built her a website, bought her a camera setup, moved money around to give her a runway, told her to take her time. She always had reasons to wait. He thought about the call from the state police. "Mr. Hall, I'm sorry to inform you. The mountain road, the guardrail, the car, over the edge, into the ravine below. The body," the officer explained carefully, "was not recoverable given the conditions of the descent. Closed casket. He'd stood at the front of the church and received people for 4 hours. Let them hold his hands. Let them say her name." He donated the insurance payout to Patricia, all of it, nearly $100,000, because the money felt wrong in his hands, and Patricia was alone, and Adrienne would have wanted her taken care of. He'd kept only the ring. He pulled into Hargrove a little after 5. The hotel was downtown, 8 blocks from the project site. He left his bag in the room, put on his jacket, and went out walking, just looking for somewhere quiet to sit and eat, somewhere he could order something good and not think about anything for an hour. He was halfway down a block he hadn't planned to take when he stopped. Through the window of a restaurant, a woman was laughing. Pregnant, heavily, visibly, 8 months at least. She was turned slightly in her seat, one hand lifted near her face. She tucked her left hand under her chin, the way she always did when something genuinely delighted her. The jaw, the tilt of her head, the exact shape of that laugh. Devante stood on the sidewalk and did not move. Devante stood on the sidewalk and breathed. That was the whole job right now. Just breathe. Don't move. Don't go through that door. His heart was doing something loud and fast behind his ribs, but his hands, he checked, were still. He looked down at them like they belonged to someone else. Still. Good. He looked back through the window. She was still laughing. Still alive. Still sitting there in a wine-colored maternity dress, with her left hand tucked under her chin like she had done 1,000 times at 1,000 dinner tables, including his. The man across from her was leaning back in his chair. Big shoulders, expensive jacket, the easy posture of someone accustomed to taking up space. He said something. She laughed again. Her whole face opened up the way it used to. Devante pulled out his phone. He kept his body angled away from the window, just slightly. Anyone watching would have seen a man checking his messages on the sidewalk. Nothing more. He raised the phone and took the first photo. Then a second. He waited. She turned, just enough, and he got her face full. Clear. Time-stamped. Undeniable. He got the man, too. Profile. Then 3/4. The way they sat together. The familiarity of it. Then he put the phone in his pocket and walked back the way he came. The rental car was 2 blocks away. He got in, closed the door, and sat. The parking garage was dim and quiet. Someone's car alarm chirped twice in the distance and then went silent. Devante set his phone on the center console and stared through the windshield at a concrete pillar. His mind was already working. That was the thing people never understood about him. He didn't need to be loud to be running fast. While his body sat completely still in that car, his mind was already sorting and stacking what he had seen, what it meant, what he did not yet know, what he needed to find out. He thought like a man who built things. You don't pour the foundation until you know the ground. He picked up his phone and called his firm's main line. Left a message for the project coordinator. He needed to push the Friday site visit. Personal matter. Could they reschedule for the following week? Then he sent an email to his supervisor, short and factual. 3 personal days, effective immediately. First time he had asked for a single personal day in 18 months. He started the car and drove back to the hotel. He did not turn on the television. He opened his laptop, ordered room service he mostly didn't eat, and got to work. The police report first. He had the PDF saved, had read it so many times in the first months that he could have recited sections from memory. Mountain Road, late evening, poor visibility. The guardrail at mile marker 14 showed fresh damage consistent with impact. Skid marks on the asphalt, approximately 40 feet. The vehicle, her vehicle, the one he'd made payments on, had gone over the edge and descended into a dense ravine. Recovery teams assessed the terrain and conditions and deemed full extraction not feasible. He read that last part again. Deemed not feasible. He had read those words a dozen times and cried over them. Tonight he read them and felt something cold and clear move through his chest. Because what he had never asked, not once, not in the fog of that grief, was how hard anyone had actually tried. He had taken the report at its word. He had accepted the death certificate. He had never pushed, never hired anyone to push on his behalf. He had trusted the process because the process had no reason to lie. He moved to his phone. He pulled up the clearest photo of the man from the restaurant, the 3/4 face shot, good light from the window, and ran a reverse image search. It took about 40 minutes, 2 different apps, and 1 professional networking platform. Foster Kimball, Hargrove, Tennessee. Real estate developer, 38 years old. His own firm, Regional Footprint, active on 2 professional profiles and a civic development board. His headshot matched the photo cleanly. Devante searched Kimball's name in combination with his social media handles, found a public account used primarily for professional goodwill, project announcements, community events, charity golf tournaments. He scrolled back through it methodically. 6 months ago, there was a post, a gathering, some kind of home celebration. The caption said something about new beginnings. The main photo showed Kimball raising a glass in a well-appointed living room. In the background, partially visible, half-turned, not tagged, a woman in a yellow dress. Devante went still. He knew that dress. He had been with Adrienne when she bought it. Pale yellow, wrap style, small covered buttons at the wrist. It had been in the car, the investigators said. Lost in the accident. He saved the photo and zoomed in until the pixels softened, then pulled back to where it was still clear enough. It was her. He knew it the way he knew her laugh through a window. Not because of any single detail, but because of all of them together. He picked up his phone and called Corinne. She answered on the second ring. It was late. She didn't mention it. "I need you to quietly find some things for me," he said. "I can't explain all of it right now, but I will." A pause, brief. "Tell me what you need," she said. He gave her 3 names and 2 dates and a document type. She wrote it down without asking why. She had watched him grieve. She knew what his voice sounded like when something was wrong. She also knew, and this was why he'd called her, that she could tell the difference between a man falling apart and a man getting started. He thanked her, ended the call. He didn't sleep. He sat in the desk chair with the legal pad in front of him, pages filling up in his small, even handwriting. Names, dates, questions. The laptop was open beside him. The party photo on the screen, the yellow dress caught in the background of a celebration that had nothing to do with him, except that it had everything to do with him. He looked at it for a long time. He didn't look away. He was up before sunrise. He didn't feel tired. He wasn't sure he felt anything yet. Not in the way that would slow him down. There was just the work, and the work was clear. He showered, dressed, ate the cold half of the room service sandwich he'd ignored the night before, and was in the rental car by 6:15. The city was still quiet, Streetlights reflected off wet pavement. A delivery truck idled outside a bakery on the main strip. Devante drove through it all like he was reading a blueprint. Steady, deliberate, looking for the thing that mattered. He had Foster Kimball's home address from a county property record that took him 11 minutes to find the night before. He'd written it on the legal pad. He drove to it now. The neighborhood was on Hargrove's west side, maybe 10 minutes from downtown. The streets were wide and clean, lined with oak trees that had been there long enough to arch over the road. The houses sat back from the street on generous lots. New builds, mostly, the kind with stone facades and two-car garages and landscaping that looked professionally maintained. It was not a neighborhood that advertised itself. It just simply was what it was. Comfortable, permanent, arrived. Devante drove past the house once without slowing. He turned around at the end of the block and parked across the street, 2 houses down. Good angle. Natural. He sat for a moment and looked. The house was well built. He could see that even from here. Good proportions, quality materials, the kind of construction that didn't cut corners on the things you couldn't see from the curb. There was a covered front porch with 2 chairs on it. A flower bed along the walkway, recently planted. A motion light above the garage. In the driveway sat a dark blue SUV. He lifted his phone and photographed it. Got the plate. He'd run it later, but he already had a feeling. He photographed the house itself. The address numbers by the front door, the garage, the porch, timestamp on every shot. He ran the plate that afternoon from a parking lot outside a coffee shop, using the same record service he'd used for the property search. The SUV was registered to Adrienne Kimball. He read the name twice. She hadn't just moved here. She hadn't just hidden here. She had built something here. She had taken another man's name while his name was still on her death certificate, while his name was still on a headstone in a cemetery back in Clarksville. She had become someone else entirely, and apparently found it easy. He set the phone face down on the passenger seat for exactly 30 seconds. Then he picked it up and kept working. The rest of the morning went like that. Methodical. One thing, then the next. He found a yoga studio 4 blocks from the house with a public website that listed class schedules and instructor names. Under a prenatal session on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, a testimonial on the studio's community page, a brief, warm little paragraph about the class, attributed to Adrienne K. He photographed the web page. He noted the time the class ended. He found a social profile under the name Adri Kimball, locked down, mostly private, but the profile photo was visible. She was smiling in it. She was wearing a light blue linen shirt he had never seen before. She looked completely, effortlessly at home. The account had followers. It had a profile photo and a location tag and a little bio that described her as a lifestyle and wellness enthusiast based in Hargrove. She was not hiding. That was the part he kept coming back to. She was not in some cramped apartment with the blinds drawn, looking over her shoulder. She had friends here, a prenatal yoga class, a social presence, a name, a house with 2 chairs on the front porch. She had made a life, a full, public, planted life, in a city 300 miles from the man who still wore her ring. The baby was due in 6 weeks. He documented all of it, timestamps on everything. He filled the rest of the legal pad and started on a fresh one he bought at a pharmacy. He called Patricia at 7 that evening, his usual time. "Hey, Mama Pat," he said. Her voice came through warm and easy, the way it always did. She asked how he was eating. He said fine. She said she'd been meaning to call him. He said he was glad she picked up. They did the thing they always did, a gentle, familiar loop of checking in, asking after nothing too heavy, making it feel like family. Then, somewhere in the middle of a story she was telling about her neighbor's garden, she said it. "It's just, with all of Adrienne's good news lately, it's got me thinking about—" She stopped. A small pause, clean and controlled, but there. You know, about life, how things turn around. Devante said. His voice did not change. That's true. She steered. He let her. She moved the conversation somewhere easier, and he followed her there, and they talked for another 4 minutes before he said he needed to get some rest. She told him she loved him. He said the same. He ended the call. He pulled up her contact record and looked at the address on file. He had not looked at it closely in months. There had been no reason to. But now he looked. It had been updated 6 months ago. A new street, a new zip code, a better one. He sat in the rental car in the dark outside that address and looked at the house. The lights were on inside. He could see the glow of a television through the curtains. She was in there right now, in a better house, in a better zip code, in a life that his money had helped build. He put the phone in the cup holder. He started the car. He drove home to Clarksville. 3 hours. He didn't turn on the radio. He didn't stop. The highway unrolled ahead of him in the dark, white dashes disappearing under the car in a steady, silent rhythm. By the time he pulled into the parking garage at his building, something had settled inside him. Not peace. Not anger. Something colder and more useful than either. He turned off the engine. He sat in the dark. And the plan began to take shape. Corinne lived 12 minutes from his apartment. He was at her door by 7:15. She opened it in a gray sweatshirt and reading glasses, coffee already in her hand. She took one look at his face and stepped back to let him in without a word. He sat at her kitchen table. He put the legal pads down first. Then his phone. Photographs pulled up. Then the printed property record, the vehicle registration, the yoga studio page, the social profile screenshot. He laid it out in the order it had happened, not because she needed the drama of it, but because the sequence was evidence, and evidence had to be presented correctly. Corinne stood across from him. She didn't sit. She read each page as he slid it forward, looked at each photograph, and didn't speak until she had seen all of it. Then she took her glasses off. She's alive. Not a question. Just saying it out loud, the way you press a bruise to confirm it's real. Yes, and Patricia knew the whole time. Corinne set her glasses on the table very carefully. She turned toward the window. He watched her shoulders rise and fall once, a slow, controlled breath that told him everything about what she was holding back. She had stood at that graveside. She had cried. He knew that. He had seen her. When she turned back around, her face was still. She had made a decision, and the decision looked like him. "What do you need?" he told her. "4 things," he said. He held up one finger at a time. First, full documentation of the fraud. Every policy, every signature, every timeline marker that could be verified. Second, a fraud attorney, not a divorce lawyer. Someone who understood the criminal exposure. Third, a complete financial accounting of the marriage. Every account, every asset, every transfer, starting from the beginning. Fourth, and this one mattered most, Adrian had to keep believing she was safe. No contact, no signals, nothing that told her the ground had shifted. "The moment she knows," he said, "she starts moving things. She talks to people. She prepares." Corinne nodded slowly. "So we move quiet." "We move quiet." She refilled her coffee. She pulled out her own notepad. They sat at her kitchen table for the next 90 minutes and started building the list. He called the attorney from his car that afternoon. A referral from a law school friend. A fraud specialist in a city 60 miles east. Someone with no connection to Clarksville or anyone in it. The consultation lasted 45 minutes. The attorney was a compact, precise woman named Sandra Holt, who asked more than she spoke and wrote everything down in a small black notebook. When Devante finished laying out the situation, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Insurance fraud, identity fraud, conspiracy. On the civil side, substantial damages, financial, emotional, what's documented. The insurance company will conduct their own investigation once they're notified through proper channels. That process runs parallel to anything we file and doesn't require your participation to move forward. And the other party, Devante said, the man she's with. Unless he was involved in planning or executing the fraud, his criminal exposure is limited. His civil exposure depends on what we can tie to direct benefit from fraudulent proceeds. She clicked her pen. The most important thing right now is that you do not contact anyone connected to this. Not the wife, not her mother, not this Kimball. Nothing. I know. Every conversation you have with any of them before we're positioned is a conversation they can prepare for. I know, he said again. That's why I'm calling you first. She told him to get her every financial record from the marriage he could access. She told him they would talk again in a week. That Friday, the monthly transfer went to Patricia on schedule. He sat in front of his laptop and watched it process, watched the number leave his account and disappear toward hers. He did not cancel it. She needed to feel safe. They all did. He went to work. He reviewed drawings. He caught a miscalculation in a load-bearing wall calculation on the Mercer project and corrected it without mentioning how he'd found it. He ate lunch at his desk. He answered emails. He was exactly who he always was, at exactly the pace he always moved. In the evenings, he and Corinne worked through financial records, his own accounts, joint accounts he still had access to, credit card statements going back 8 years. Corinne was meticulous. She flagged anomalies without editorializing. He cataloged everything she flagged. He told no one else. Not yet. That night, late, he sat at his drafting table. There were no drawings in front of him, just the desk, the lamp, a half-full coffee cup gone cold. He reached up and slid the ring off his finger. He set it on the table beside the cup and looked at it. It was a plain gold band. He had picked it out himself. He remembered the jeweler's case, the afternoon light in the shop, how sure he had felt. He looked at it for a long time. Then he reached out, picked it up, and put it back on. Not yet. She showed up on a Wednesday evening without calling first. Devante opened the door, and Corinne walked past him with her bag over one shoulder and a thick folder pressed against her chest. She set everything on his kitchen table and stepped back. She didn't say, "Look at this," or "You need to see this." She just stepped back and let him come to it. He pulled out the nearest chair and sat down. The papers were organized the way Corinne organized everything. Clean stacks, labeled tabs, oldest dates on top. He started reading. The first policy was familiar in the worst possible way. He recognized his own signature at the bottom of page 3. His name in the beneficiary line. $200,000. Taken out 3 months before the accident. He remembered the afternoon vaguely. Adrian had set papers in front of him at the kitchen table, explained it as responsible planning, said they were behind where they should be financially. She handled the finances. He trusted her with finances. He had read the first paragraph, seen his name, and signed. He had never collected. He had thought about it in the early months. His attorney at the time, a general practice guy in Clarksville, not a specialist, had mentioned it. Devante had said he wasn't ready. Then months passed, and he still wasn't ready, and eventually it became one of those things that sat in a drawer in his mind, behind a door he didn't open. He turned to the second tab. He read the name at the top of the document. He read it again. Patricia Wade, beneficiary, $85,000, taken out 6 months before the first policy, 6 months before the one with his name on it. He set the page down flat on the table. He looked at it the way he looked at structural drawings when something didn't line up, not with panic, but with a slow, deliberate focus, tracing the load back to its source. Adrian had built this in 2 stages. First, she secured Patricia's payout. Then she put a larger policy in Devante's name, enough to look like responsible planning, enough that he would sign without question, enough that he would never cash it because he would be too deep in grief to think practically. She had read him correctly. She had read him like a blueprint and accounted for every load-bearing point. Patricia had collected. Immediately after the death. He did the math without reaching for a calculator. 22 months. Monthly transfers. The number he had been sending Patricia out of love. Out of the belief that she was a grieving mother who had lost her only daughter and needed the help. He had sent it the way he did everything for the people he loved, without keeping score, without expecting acknowledgement, because that was who he was, and he had thought she knew that about him. 22 months, a little over $19,000, sitting on top of $85,000 she had already collected. He sat with that number for a moment. Not the total, the shape of it. Patricia had stood at that casket. She had held his hand. She had cried, or done something that looked enough like crying that he had put his arm around her and told her Adrienne would want them to take care of each other. He had said that. He remembered saying that. And she had already cashed the check. He looked up at Corinne. She was leaning against the counter with her arms crossed, watching him the way someone watches a person carry something heavy up a long flight of stairs, close enough to help, far enough to let them do it themselves. No outside accounts, he said. No transfers to third parties. No help. Just the two of them, Corinne confirmed. Adrienne structured both policies herself. Patricia executed her end. That's the whole machine. He nodded slowly. He stood up and walked to his laptop. He opened it, navigated to his bank account, and found the scheduled transfer to Patricia's account. It was set to process in 4 days. He canceled it. Then he opened a new window and started the process to change his account number. It took 11 minutes. He did it carefully, the same way he did everything. When he was done, he closed the laptop and turned around. Corinne hadn't moved. "She'll notice," he said. Patricia. Within a few days of the date it was supposed to hit. Corinne uncrossed her arms. And then nothing. He pulled out his chair and sat back down. That's the point. He looked at the papers still spread across his table. The two policies side by side, one with his name, one with hers. "She'll get nervous," he said. "She'll call. Maybe she calls Adrienne. Maybe she doesn't. Maybe she's too scared to." He straightened the stack without looking up. "But she'll feel it. She'll know something shifted, and she won't know what. That's where I want her." He set both hands flat on the table. "You don't squeeze the center first," he said. "You apply pressure at the edges. You let them feel it before they see it coming." The folder Corinne brought that Tuesday was thicker than the last one. She sat across from Devante at his kitchen table and opened it herself this time, spreading the sections out in order. She had color-coded the tabs. He noticed that, without commenting on it. "Foster Allen Kimball," she said. 38. Born and raised in Hargrove. Third-generation money, but not the kind that sits still, the kind that works. His grandfather had a hardware business. His father did property management. Foster took the model and scaled it. Devante pulled the first section toward him. A printout of public business filings. 6 LLCs, all registered in the state of Hargrove. All with different names, all with Foster's signature somewhere in the chain of ownership. "What are the entities doing?" he asked. 3 are holding companies for residential development projects. 1 manages commercial leasing. 1 is the operating entity for his main firm, Kimball Development Group. The 6th is newer, registered 14 months ago. She tapped that page. Mixed use, community-focused. The kind of project that gets you quoted in the local paper about affordable housing. Devante looked at the filing date on the 6th LLC. 14 months ago. He did the math without saying it out loud. 14 months ago was approximately 4 months after Adrienne arrived in Hargrove. Foster had been building outward, expanding. A man with a settled home life and a clear professional horizon. He set the page down and moved to the next section. Municipal contracts. He counted 5 active agreements, 2 with Hargrove's City Planning Department, 1 with the County Housing Authority, 2 with a regional infrastructure fund that pulled from state money. The total contract value across all 5 was just over $4 million. He's not just connected to City Hall, Devante said. He practically has a desk there, Corinne said. His name is in the acknowledgments section of the last 2 city council planning reports. He donates to 3 of the sitting council members' campaigns. Small amounts, clean, nothing that raises a flag. He sponsors a youth baseball league. He has a table at every major civic fundraiser in that city. Devante nodded. He knew this type of operation. He had worked around men like Foster Kimball on development projects in 3 different cities. They were not corrupt exactly. They were embedded. The distinction mattered. Financial records, he said. Clean. Corinne said it flat and certain. I went back 4 years. No suspicious transfers. No payments to outside parties that don't have a clear business purpose. No financial fingerprints connecting him to the insurance policies or the fraud planning. His accounts tell the story of a man who runs a legitimate business and makes good money doing it. Devante was quiet for a moment. He already knew what the records would show, had suspected it from the timeline. The affair began 4 years ago. Foster met Adrienne somewhere in those 4 years, fell hard, and received her the way she needed him to. As a woman escaping a difficult situation, a woman who deserved better, a woman worth building something with. He had not known what he was really receiving. He found out later, after the house was in his name, after she was pregnant with his child, after he had already chosen her in every way that mattered to his daily life. And he had stayed quiet. That was the fact Devante kept returning to. Not that Foster had helped plan it. He hadn't. But the man had learned the truth about what Adrienne had done to another human being. A specific man, a husband, a person who existed. And he had made a calculation. He had decided that what he stood to lose by speaking was more than what that man deserved by knowing. He had called that calculation love. Devante knew better. His whole operation runs on trust, Devante said. He wasn't asking. Every piece of it, Corinne said. The municipal contracts require clean hands. Development partners don't go in on projects with men who carry scandal. City officials don't return calls from someone they're reading about in the wrong kind of article. He doesn't have to be charged with anything. No, Corinne agreed. He just has to be known. Devante looked at the conference schedule she had printed and included at the back of the folder. Regional Architecture and Development Summit, Hargrove Convention Center, 3 weeks out. A 2-day event drawing firms and developers from the surrounding region. You can get me on the presenter list? He asked. Already made the call, Corinne said. There's a breakout session on mixed-use community development. They had a slot open. Your project portfolio fits it better than anyone else they had lined up. She paused. You'll be legitimate. Fully. She said that part like she wanted him to hear it clearly. He heard it. He closed the folder and set it on top of the others. That evening, after Corinne had gone, he booked 2 flights to Hargrove, his own. Then a second one, same dates, departing from the regional airport 40 minutes south of Clarksville where his father lived. He called Jerome. His father picked up on the second ring. He didn't say hello. Jerome Hall had never been a man who wasted words on formalities with family. He said, "You good?" "I'm good," Devante said. "I need you to come somewhere with me. 3 weeks from now, Hargrove." A short silence. Then Jerome asked the only question he had. "It's time," Devante said. The bank statements were organized by year, oldest to newest, in the same color-coded system Corinne had built. Devante had been working through them slowly, 1 month at a time, looking for anything that didn't fit. Most of it fit. Mortgage payments, car notes, groceries, the recurring transfers to Patricia for her medical bills. The charges from Adrienne's business expenses, website hosting, a branding consultant, a design software subscription that renewed every year without producing anything visible. He was in the third year of records when he found it. A Friday charge, a hotel name he didn't recognize, $412. He stared at it for a moment, set down his coffee. He knew where he had been that weekend. A structural review in Memphis, a project that had run long. He'd stayed at a hotel there, the same chain he always used for work trips, the bill expensed through the firm. He remembered the weekend clearly because the project review had gone sideways on Saturday morning and he'd spent most of the day on the phone with the contractor. He had not been anywhere near the hotel on this statement. He wrote down the name and the charge date. He moved on through the rest of the month, then went back. The hotel was in Delwood. He looked it up. Delwood was a small city, 2 hours southeast of Clarksville. He had no reason to have ever been there. No project, no family, nothing. He called the hotel the next morning, early before he left for work. He kept his voice flat and businesslike, told the front desk manager he was reviewing an old statement and believed there may have been a billing error on his card for a reservation he hadn't authorized. He gave the date. He gave the last 4 digits. The manager put him on hold for 3 minutes. When she came back, she told him the reservation had been made online. 2 nights, 1 room, checked in on the Friday, checked out on the Sunday. The card had been used at check-in. The reservation was not flagged as disputed at the time. He thanked her and hung up. He sat at his kitchen table and looked at the statement again. $412. His card. His account. A hotel he had never been to, in a city he had never visited. On a weekend when he was 4 hours away, working 70-hour weeks because they were behind on the mortgage, and Adrienne's business hadn't turned a profit, and Patricia had needed a specialist. He went back through the other years with different eyes. He found 2 more. Different hotels, different cities, both within the same driving radius of Clarksville. Both on weekends when his own work travel records placed him somewhere else. Both small charges, the kind that disappeared into the noise of a busy joint account. The kind a man who trusted his wife wouldn't stop to question. He added them up. He did not need a calculator. He sat with it for a long time. The affair hadn't started the year before the accident. It hadn't even started 2 years before. It had started 4 years ago, at minimum, in the same stretch of time when he had been most convinced they were fighting together towards something real. The years he stayed late. The years he picked up extra consulting work on weekends. The years he told himself, "We're building something, and it takes sacrifice, and she knows that, and so do I." She had been in hotel rooms on his card while he was on job sites believing that. It wasn't just that she had left. It wasn't even just that she had faked her death. It was that the marriage he had been inside of, the one he had treated as real, the one he had given everything to, the one he had grieved, had never existed the way he understood it. He hadn't lost something that broke. He had been living in something that was never built. He had paid for the lie with his own hands. That evening, he called Jerome. He didn't build up to it. He just said it, plainly, the way his father had always talked to him. The affair started 4 years ago. She used his card to fund it. He covered the hotel bills himself. He had been working double to pay for his own deception without ever knowing it. Jerome didn't interrupt. He didn't make a sound. He just listened, the way he had always listened to things that needed to be heard before they could be dealt with. When Devante finished, Jerome was quiet for a moment. Then, "You already know what you're going to do. You called because you needed to say it out loud to someone who loves you." Devante looked out his window at the dark street below. "Yeah," he said. "Then say it." "I'm going to take everything she thought she walked away from," Devante said, "and use it to close every door in front of her." Jerome didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was low and even. "Then stop talking to me and go do it." Devante ended the call. He sat for 1 more minute. Then he opened his laptop. He sent 2 messages, one to his attorney, one to Corinne. Identical. 4 words. I'm ready. Let's move. He pulled up the airline site and booked the Hargrove flights. His own first, then his father's. Then he went to his bedroom, pulled a bag from the closet, and packed it deliberately, the way his father had always taught him to pack before a job. Only what you need, nothing extra. He turned off the light. He got into bed. He slept. The hotel was 12 floors and a better view than the last one. Devante noticed this without caring much about it. He set his bag on the luggage rack, hung his suit for tomorrow, and checked the time. Jerome was 2 floors up. They had agreed to meet downstairs at 7. He had 40 minutes. He stood at the window and looked at Hargrove spread out below him, the lit grid of streets, the low skyline, a construction crane frozen mid-swing against the evening sky. Somewhere to the west, past the neighborhoods he couldn't see from here, was a house with a dark blue SUV in the driveway. He did not think about it. He had already thought about it enough. He changed his shirt, washed his face, and went downstairs. Jerome was already in the lobby when Devante stepped off the elevator. Sitting in one of the wide chairs near the entrance, back straight, hands resting on his knees, wearing the dark gray jacket he saved for anything that required one. He looked up when he heard Devante's footsteps. He didn't say anything. He just stood. They walked to the hotel restaurant together. The attorney, Marcus Webb, was already at the table. A corner booth, away from the bar noise, a glass of water in front of him, and a slim leather portfolio beside it. He was compact and precise, the kind of man who moved through rooms without drawing attention, which was exactly why Devante had hired him. He stood when they approached and shook both their hands. They ordered. The food was secondary. Marcus opened the portfolio and walked them through it efficiently, the way Devante had asked him to. No preamble, no ceremony. The civil fraud case was filed and ready to execute. Devante's signature had been on nothing that morning. That was intentional. The filings were Marcus's work, his firm's stamp, everything structured so that when Adrienne and her attorney eventually pulled the documents, the architecture of the case was impossible to dismantle quickly. The insurance company had been formally notified through proper legal channels 6 days ago. That notification had triggered its own independent investigation, a separate process run by the company's fraud division that did not require Devante's participation or testimony to proceed. The machine was already running. He had started it and stepped back, and now it would move at its own pace regardless of what happened tomorrow. Criminal exposure for both of them? Jerome asked. It was the first thing he had said since they sat down. Yes, Marcus said. He kept it simple, the way Jerome had asked it. The insurance company's investigators will refer to the DA's office once they've completed their review. That's standard. Both names are on the documentation, both policies, both timelines. They don't need Devante to build that case. The paper builds it. Jerome nodded once. He picked up his fork. Devante walked them through tomorrow. He had already given Marcus the sequence, but he said it again at the table, plainly, so every piece was in the same air at the same time. Foster Kimball first. Morning. The follow-up meeting Foster had agreed to at the conference. A hotel lobby cafe, professional setting, Devante's name still meaning nothing to Foster beyond the session he'd attended today. Documentation Package 1 was ready. Photographs, the deed, the insurance policies, the affair timeline traced back 4 years. That folder would be left on the table when Devante walked out. Adrienne, second. Midday. Her prenatal yoga class ended at noon. Devante knew the studio. He would be parked outside. He looked at Jerome when he said it. I'll stay in the car, Jerome said. Not a question. That one's mine, Devante said. Jerome didn't push. He looked at his plate and cut his food and said, I know. Patricia. 3rd. The afternoon. Her address. The better zip code. The house the insurance money had helped buy. Documentation Package 3. The policy she collected. The 22 months of transfers Devante had made to her after the death. The voicemails she had left him. All of it, printed and dated. Marcus confirmed that all 3 packages were assembled, organized, and in the portfolio. He would be available by phone throughout the day. He would not be present at any of the 3 meetings. Devante had not wanted him there. These were not legal proceedings. They were something else, and they needed to feel like what they were. They finished dinner. Marcus settled the check before Devante could reach for it, tucked his portfolio under his arm, and shook their hands again at the table. "You've built this correctly," he said to Devante. "Every piece is where it needs to be." Then he walked out. Jerome and Devante sat for a while after that. The restaurant noise moved around them. Neither of them felt the need to fill the space. When they stood to leave, Jerome put his hand briefly on Devante's shoulder. Not squeezing, not gripping, just resting there for a second. Then he took it away. They rode the elevator up together and parted on the 6th floor. "Get some sleep," Jerome said, stepping into the hallway. Devante nodded. He rode up to his floor. He hung his keycard on the door handle, took off his shoes, and lay down on top of the covers, still dressed. He closed his eyes. He slept. The conference center was 3 blocks from the hotel. Devante walked it. The morning was cool and bright, the kind of fall day that made a city look better than it was. He wore his charcoal suit, the good one, the one that fit right across the shoulders. His shoes were polished. His portfolio was under his arm. He looked exactly like what he was, a senior architect who had earned his place at this table. He signed in at the registration desk, clipped his badge to his lapel, and walked into the main hall. The room was already filling up. 200 people, maybe more, developers, architects, city planners, project managers, coffee stations in every corner. The low hum of professionals running through their networking calculations before the first session even started. Devante moved through it easily, stopping at the coffee, reading the program, letting the room settle around him. He spotted Foster Kimball within 10 minutes. Hard to miss. Foster was near the center of the room, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a cup, talking to a group of 3 men who were all angled slightly toward him. The body language of people receiving attention from someone they considered important. Foster was taller than Devante had registered from the restaurant window, broader. He wore a well-cut navy blazer and carried himself with the particular ease of a man on familiar ground. He laughed at something one of the men said and clapped him once on the arm. Devante watched him for exactly 4 seconds. Then he turned and went to find the breakout room for his session. The session was at 9:30. Mixed-use community development in mid-sized cities. Devante's subject, the one he had spent the better part of a decade building expertise in. He had 45 minutes and a room that sat 60. By the time he started, there were 70 people in it, some standing along the back wall. He did not use notes. He talked about load-bearing principles applied to community design. How the same logic that keeps a building standing determines whether a neighborhood stays together or pulls apart. He talked about the projects he had worked on in Clarksville, the ones he had watched fail in other cities and why, the specific mistakes developers made when they prioritized returns over structural thinking. He used plain language. He drew on the whiteboard. People leaned forward. Foster Kimball was in the 4th row. Devante registered his presence at the 2-minute mark and then set it aside entirely. He gave the room everything he had, not for Foster, but because this was his work and he was good at it, and it deserved to be given fully. At the end, 3 people came up with cards before he'd even stepped away from the whiteboard. The afternoon networking block ran from 2 to 4. Devante spent it doing exactly what the event was designed for. Moving through the room, trading information, following up on the genuine interest his session had generated. A city planner from a neighboring county wanted to talk about a transit corridor project. A development firm rep asked about consulting availability. Devante took the meeting seriously, gave honest answers, stayed present. At 3:15, Foster Kimball walked up to him. "Good session this morning," Foster said. He extended his hand. His grip was firm, practiced. "Foster Kimball. I run a development firm here in Hargrove. We do a lot of the kind of mixed-use work you were describing." "Devante Hall." Devante shook his hand. "Appreciate you saying so. You with a firm out of—" Foster glanced at the badge. "Clarksville, for now. I've got some interest developing in this market." Foster's expression shifted slightly. Just a click of increased attention, the look of a man who had heard something that registered as relevant. "Is that right? We should talk. Some of what you laid out this morning maps pretty directly onto challenges we run into on the municipal side." "I'd be open to it," Devante said. They exchanged cards. Foster's was heavy stock, embossed. Devante's was clean and simple. "I'm slammed through tomorrow morning," Foster said, "but I could do coffee after. Say, 9 o'clock? There's a cafe right in the lobby of the Meridian. I'm staying there." "That works," Devante said. Foster smiled. Confident, easy, a man used to meetings going the way he arranged them. "Good. I'll have my assistant confirm." He tapped Devante's card once against his palm and moved on. Devante watched him go. Then he turned back to the city planner and picked up exactly where they had left off. Jerome was in the armchair by the window when Devante knocked and let himself into the room. The television was off. Jerome had a glass of water and a folded newspaper. He looked up. "How'd he look?" Jerome asked. Devante set his portfolio on the table and loosened his tie. He thought about it for a real second before he answered. "Like a man who's been waiting for something bad to happen," he said, and talked himself out of it every morning. Jerome was quiet for a moment. Then, "That kind of tired doesn't fight back hard." Devante nodded. Jerome picked up the room service menu from the nightstand and held it out. The Meridian's lobby cafe was quiet at 9 in the morning. Warm light, the smell of coffee, and something baking. Small marble tables, low voices, the soft clink of cups. Devante arrived first. He chose a table near the window, away from the bar. He sat with his back to the wall and his portfolio flat on the chair beside him. He ordered a black coffee and watched the lobby. Foster came in at 9:03, moving with the easy confidence of a man on his own ground. He spotted Devante, smiled, extended his hand on the approach. "Morning," Foster said. He pulled out the chair across from Devante and sat. Signaled the server without looking at the menu. "Glad we could make this work. I've been thinking about your session. The load-bearing principle framing. That's something I want to bring back to my team." Devante let him talk. Foster outlined 2 projects, a mixed-use corridor on Hargrove's east side, a community anchor development near the university. He talked about municipal relationships, timelines, budget structures. He was good at this, clear, organized, genuinely knowledgeable. He used his hands when he talked. His coffee arrived, and he didn't pause. 30 seconds. Devante had decided on 30 seconds. He let it run a little longer than that. Let Foster finish a thought about zoning flexibility. Then Devante reached down, lifted the folder from the chair beside him, and set it on the table between them. He did not open it. Foster looked at the folder. Then at Devante. "I'm not a business contact," Devante said. His voice was quiet and level. "I'm her husband, the one she told you was dead." The change in Foster's face was not sudden. It was the opposite of sudden. It was the slow settling of a structure that had been under too much weight for too long, the way a wall doesn't collapse all at once but shows you, in stages, that it was always going to. Foster said nothing. Devante opened the folder. The photographs were on top. Adrian outside the restaurant, laughing, her face clear and time-stamped. Below that, the house deed with Foster's name on it. Below that, the SUV registration, the insurance policy documents, both of them, the $200,000 and the $85,000, with the beneficiary lines visible, the hotel charge from 3 years ago, the timeline printed clean, 4 years of documentation laid out in order. Foster looked at the pages. His jaw tightened. He set down his coffee cup very carefully. "I didn't know," he said. "Not at first. Not until it was after. We were all ready. The house was all ready." He stopped, pressed his lips together. "By the time she told me, I didn't know what to do." Devante waited. "I should have—" Foster looked up, then back at the table. "I know I should have." Devante let the silence hold for a moment. Then he said, "You didn't know what to do, so you did nothing." He kept his voice even, not cold, just precise. "I was sending her mother money every month. I was wearing my wedding ring. I was calling that woman son and meaning it. And you were living in the house, in the life, in everything she bought with my grief. And you decided it wasn't worth the inconvenience of telling the truth." Foster had no answer. Because there was no answer. That was exactly what had happened. And Foster was a smart enough man to know it. "I didn't build the trap," Devante said. "You didn't either. But you decided to keep what it caught." He told Foster what had been filed. The insurance company investigation, triggered through his attorney, already running independent of anything Devante needed to do personally. The civil suit, which named Foster for damages connected to his knowing participation in concealing the fraud. His attorneys would argue the late discovery. They would probably succeed on the criminal side. But the civil liability was real, and it would be pursued completely. Devante did not raise his voice. He did not lean forward. He spoke the way he would explain a structural problem to a client. Clearly, completely, without drama. "I came here to look you in the face," he said. "So you'd know what kind of man you decided wasn't worth a phone call." He closed the folder. He left it on the table. He stood up, dropped enough cash for both coffees beside his untouched cup, and walked out through the lobby without looking back. The yoga studio was on a side street off Hargrove's main commercial block. Brick front. A small chalkboard sign by the door with the class schedule written in careful letters. Devante parked across the street at 11:45 and watched the entrance. Jerome stayed in the car. The class let out just past noon. Women came through the door in ones and twos, carrying bags, pulling on jackets in the cool air. Devante sat still. Then Adrienne came out. She was wearing a loose gray top and carried a water bottle in one hand and a book in the other. Her hair was up. She was 8 months along and moving slowly, carefully, the way women do in the last weeks. She said something to the woman beside her, smiled at whatever came back, and then turned toward the street. She saw him. The book hit the sidewalk, not dropped carefully, not set down. It hit the pavement, and she did not look at it. She stood absolutely still, her water bottle gripped tight, and stared at the man standing on the opposite sidewalk, looking back at her. Devante crossed the street slowly. He stopped 6 feet from her. She opened her mouth. "Devante, I don't need the story," he said. "I have the story. I've had it for 3 weeks." He told her what had been filed, the insurance investigation, the civil suit, the complete documentation his attorney had assembled, the policies, the timeline, the hotel charge, the social profile, the registration on the SUV. He watched her understand, in real time, that the thing she had built with such careful patience was not holding anymore. She tried once more. "I was going to—" "No," he said. Quiet. Final. Then he said what the law could not say for him. "You let me grieve you. You let me stand at a casket that had nothing in it and cry and tell people I loved you and mean every word of it." He paused. 4 years you were using my card to go meet him in hotels. 4 years you came home and sat across from me at dinner and let me love you like you'd earned it. And when you were done, you had your mother hold my hand at your funeral and cash the check." Adrienne was very still. Her face had gone through several things and had come to rest somewhere that was not quite defiance and not quite shame, just exposure, the specific stripping discomfort of a person who has run out of room to manage the narrative. "The baby deserves better than what you are," Devante said. "I hope you figure out how to be that before she gets here." He turned and walked back to the car. He did not look back. Patricia's house was in a neighborhood that had good bones, wide sidewalks, clean gutters, mature trees beginning to turn for fall, the better zip code. She had moved up with his grief money and her daughter's fraud money and told herself it was fine because the man she'd taken it from was strong, that he would be okay, that he would move on. Devante and Jerome walked up the front path together. Jerome rang the bell. Patricia answered in less than a minute, which meant she had been watching for a car she didn't recognize. She was dressed neatly. Slacks, a cardigan, the composed look of a woman who had decided to present herself as someone with nothing to hide. She looked at Jerome first, then at Devante. Her face didn't break, but something went out of it. "Devante," she said. "Mama Pat," he said. He said it without warmth. He said it like a label being removed from something it no longer described. She stepped back from the door and let them in without being asked, as if some part of her had known for weeks that this was where all of it was going, had simply been waiting for the day to finally show up and be what it was. The kitchen table was small and clean. Devante set his folder down and opened it. He placed the documents one at a time. The $85,000 insurance policy, Patricia's name on the beneficiary line, the collection record, the date she received the funds, 4 days after the death certificate was filed. Then the transfer records, 22 months of deposits from his account into hers, $19,240, the dates printed clearly, every single one. Then her own voicemails, printed transcripts, the timestamps visible. "Baby, she's at peace. She's at peace, and she loved you so much." The one from month 9 where she said, "I don't know what I would do without you checking on me like this." The one from month 14 where she said, "You are such a good man, Devante. She was so lucky to have you." Patricia stood at the edge of the kitchen and looked at the table and did not speak. "You held my hand at her casket," Devante said. "I hugged you. I drove you home after. I called you every 2 weeks for almost 2 years because I thought you were hurting the same way I was." He looked at her steadily. "You let me." He told her about the civil suit, her inclusion in it, the insurance company investigation that was already running, and that would find her the same way it was going to find Adrienne, because the paper trail was complete, and it led directly to her door. He closed the folder. He was done. Jerome had not spoken since they walked in. He had stood near the kitchen doorway with his hands at his sides and his face composed and still. Now he looked at Patricia, not with anger, but with something quieter and more permanent than anger. "My son loved your daughter with everything he had," Jerome said, each word placed down like something heavy and exact. "You should be ashamed of what you let him do." He turned and walked out the front door. Devante followed his father without another word. They did not wait for a response. There was nothing Patricia could have said that would have changed what was true, and they both knew it. And so they left her standing in her kitchen in the better zip code that was not going to be hers much longer. 6 months later, the legal machinery that Devante had set in motion finished its work. The insurance company's investigation ran clean and thorough and arrived at the same conclusions Devante's attorney had built toward for months. Adrienne, facing charges and a newborn daughter and no real ground to stand on, negotiated a plea. No prison time, but restitution. A felony record that would follow her for the rest of her life. On every application, every background check, every door she tried to walk through. The life she had built so carefully on Devontae's name, and Devontae's grief, and Devontae's absolute sincerity, now had a crack running through its foundation that would never fully close. Patricia received a suspended sentence. The house in the better zip code, purchased in part with fraudulently collected insurance funds, was subject to asset recovery. She lost it. The monthly transfers were long gone. The son-in-law who called every 2 weeks was gone too, replaced by a line in a civil complaint. She moved back to a zip code that looked like the one she'd started in, older now and diminished in ways that had nothing to do with money. Foster Kimball was not criminally charged. His attorneys argued the late discovery successfully, and the timeline protected him on that front, just as Devontae had known it would when he decided the conference was the right venue and not a police station. But the civil suit settled for a meaningful sum, and the settlement was not quiet. The story moved through Hargrove's professional circles the way those stories always do, not as an announcement, but as a murmur, growing, reaching the people it needed to reach. Development partners who had once called Foster first began calling less quickly. 2 municipal contracts went under extended review, the kind of review that has no defined end date. City officials who had once made time for him in their calendars began filling those slots with other names. He would rebuild, probably. Men like Foster usually did, but he would do it smaller, and without the clean hands that had made every room feel like his room. Devontae donated the civil settlement to an HBCU architecture scholarship fund. He did not announce it. He set it up, named it after no one, and let it run. The divorce paperwork came back signed without a single notation. Adrienne had no ground on which to contest anything, and she knew it. The marriage that had already been over for years became over on paper too, and Devontae filed it and moved on. His career, meanwhile, had opened up in a direction he hadn't anticipated when he drove to Hargrove the first time with nothing but a folder of photographs and a plan. The connections he made at the conference, genuine ones, built on actual work, generated introductions that led to a commission that landed on his desk 4 months after the reckoning. A community development project, mixed use, multi-phase, anchored around a transit corridor on Hargrove's east side, the most significant commission of his career. The city he had come to reclaim something from had given him something new instead. He was in Hargrove regularly now. He had kept his apartment in Clarksville, but he was spending more time in the new city, learning its streets, understanding its bones. He did not avoid the restaurant where he had first seen Adrienne through the glass. He did not reroute around the yoga studio or the neighborhood on the west side where the house with her name on the registration still sat. He moved through the city like a man who belonged there because he did now, because he had earned that. One morning, getting dressed for an early site meeting, he looked at the ring on his left hand. He didn't think about it for very long. He just took it off and placed it in the back of the top drawer of his dresser, between a watch he rarely wore and a folded card from his father he had kept for years. He did not mark the moment. He closed the drawer and finished getting dressed and went to work. The barbecue spot on Clement Street had been there since Devontae was 12 years old. It was loud on a Saturday. Families at every table, children running the space between booths, the smoker out back doing its work all morning so that by noon the whole block smelled like something good. Jerome always got the same thing. Devontae usually did too. They sat across from each other in the corner booth with their food in front of them, and the noise of other people's lives surrounding them on all sides. Jerome ate for a while before he said anything. Then he put down his fork and looked at his son and said, "How do you feel?" Devontae thought about it, not because he didn't know the answer. He had known it for a while now, but because the question deserved the real thing and not just the first thing. "Like I can see again," he said. Jerome nodded once. He reached across the table and picked up the hot sauce and held it out. Devante took it. He was hungry. He ate. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.